Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today is the 250th birthday of the United States Navy, founded October 13th, 1775, even before the United States as a country was founded. We recently found out that Naval History and Heritage Command, the organization that's part of the Navy, mostly civilians, and they do Navy artifacts and Navy museums and even underwater archaeology of sunken military crafts. Those folks are putting together a book looking at objects in the Navy's own collection, and they're going to have 250 artifacts written about in this book in honor of the Navy's 250th birthday. So we were thinking about what would this museum do for that. So today we're going to do a video on the 250 best artifacts on the battleship that tell the Navy's history. What do you mean we can't do all 200? We're going to do a video on the top 5 artifacts on the battleship that I would include in this book to tell the Navy's to help tell the Navy's history. So first of all, the book is specifically Navy artifacts. So it is objects that are in the collection of the United States Navy. That's Naval History and Heritage Command maintains them. Many of them are out at the Navy's 10 museums. Some of them are in storage at this point. Some of them are undergoing conservation. So 5 objects that we have that are not going to show up in that book that I think would be worthy of including are the USS Enterprise stern plate. This is the largest piece of Enterprise that was saved when she was cut up for scrap. It's the part at the back of the ship that actually has her name welded onto it. Fantastic artifact of the most decorated Navy warship of World War II. Now, that artifact does now belong to Naval History and Heritage Command. However, that only happened within the last 2 weeks. So that happened in October of 2025. So it has not made it into the book. And that artifact is here on display at Battleship New Jersey for the time being. And it is the Navy's artifact. So when they have the National Museum of the U.S. Navy set up and ready to go, they're going to recall that loan, and then the stern plate will be taken to be put on display at that National Museum in D.C. Now, all of the other service branches have a national museum. Even the Air Force, which has only existed for like 70 years compared to the 250 years that the Army and the Navy have existed. Even the Marine Corps has a national museum, and they're a part of the Navy. So the Navy is working to fix this, and they're thinking that with enough fundraising that they can have this National Museum built in D.C. in the next 5 years or so. So we're going to leave a link down to Naval History and Heritage Command's website so you can go and check them out and hopefully support their museum efforts. So Enterprise stern plate is number 1. Artifact number 2 that I would include on that list is Battleship New Jersey's 1911 handgun. Now, you guys heard earlier this year that we recovered that handgun. It has a serial number that shows that it was on board Battleship New Jersey in the 1980s. That particular gun was made in 1943, the same year that the battleship was commissioned, and we're still doing research on it to see what other duty stations it might have had. Individually, that gun, being a Battleship New Jersey gun, I'm not sure makes it important enough to include in a book like this one that the Navy's putting out. However, as an example of one of the primary weapons carried by Navy ships for basically the entire 20th century, I think that a 1911 makes a fantastic artifact for inclusion there. And that if you can tie it specifically by serial number to a ship or a special event, then that absolutely makes it worthwhile. Naval History and Heritage Command does own a weapons collection of historic weapons, but off the top of my head, I can't tell you any of those weapons are included in this book or how many might be. But I think that a Battleship New Jersey 1911 would be a fantastic addition. Next up, we got two items that relate to the very senior individuals that served on Battleship New Jersey. First off, the set of binoculars right here with Admiral engraved in the back of them was removed from Battleship New Jersey when she was decommissioned in 1969. And at that time, they were believed to be the original World War II binoculars. Now, the person who was told to remove them has since donated them to the museum, and we're very appreciative of that. We've had them for a little bit over 2 years at this point. That showed up in the mail just before we went to dry dock with all that excitement. These binoculars very much match pictures of Admiral Halsey with the type, the way it's engraved with Admiral, the way it's got the white strap around here. You know, thousands of these binoculars existed, so it's hard to say with 100% certainty that these are the binoculars that Halsey used during the Battle of Leyte Gulf on board Battleship New Jersey. But there is a very strong chance that they are, and no other set of binoculars have turned up that are believed to have been that. So these are a very important artifact. And what's more, we talk about Halsey here because he's an important individual, but these would have been used, if they are the original World War II binoculars, then they would have been used by all of New Jersey's famous admirals throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it only missed the one or two admirals who were on board in the 1980s. So that association with multiple, massively historic figures on the battleship is really important. There is a binocular case that sits on the flag bridge on the O3 level of New Jersey, which is almost certainly where these would have been, and that's where our donor said that he removed them from when the ship was being decommissioned, which means that not only Halsey, but Admiral Spruance, Admiral Jocko Clark, possibly even Admiral Nimitz when he visits in December of 44, would have all used possibly this very pair of binoculars. So something like this would make a fantastic addition to the book. Just as, hey, this is a very typical thing for ships to carry. Throughout the history of the Navy, magnifying devices like this were important, and being able to tie this into Battleship New Jersey and extremely historically significant Navy figures like those would make this a fantastic addition. Similarly, we have this phone here, which it's been many years since we've done a video about. This is one of the ship service phones installed when the ship was first built to interconnect the various flag spaces on the battleship. So we've been referring to this as the Halsey telephone. There would have been a series of these in various flag spaces. This seems to be the only one that survived. It was almost certainly in one of the spaces that was interpreted as the Halsey stateroom later in the ship's career, when they came on board with a historic interest as opposed to the modern 1980s ship. Some of these flag spaces, like the one we're in right now, the Admiral's Chief of Staff cabin, would have been outfitted with some of that original equipment, much like it is today as a museum. And so, for all the same reasons that we were talking about that binocular and how it has an association with multiple admirals potentially, this phone also is associated with the battleship, the most decorated surviving ship in the U.S. Navy, the most decorated ship afloat, and all of the admirals who ever occupied the ship's flag spaces. And honestly, because many of the admirals who visit this ship, like really famous ones like your Arleigh Burkes and your Chester Nimitzes and those sorts of guys, when they visit, the ship's usually in port. There isn't always an occasion to use the binoculars, but there's almost certainly always an occasion to use the phone system. So there is a stronger case that Admiral Nimitz would have been called on the phone in the flag space and handled that than there is the binoculars. So that is another really great thing. And then Again, it ties into internal communications, command and control, all those sorts of things that are important on ships throughout history. And the final object I would include, we're now in the Combat Engagement Center, is the nuclear launch keys for the battleship. It's still incredible to me that the museum was able to find these. And the story of nuclear weapons really is the story of the Navy for the last 75 or so years. So roughly a quarter or so of the Navy's total history is the history of the nuclear Navy. So being able to tell that story through the ship's nuclear launch keys, which were found on board, and therefore, you know, the binoculars, maybe there's an argument to be made they're not authentic. It's pretty indefensible to argue that the nuclear launch keys that we found on board that fit in the nuclear launch consoles are not the authentic Battleship New Jersey launch keys. I think that does a great job of telling the history of the Navy in recent years, of the ship in recent years. Again, it ties into a specific ship. So I think that makes a really fantastic artifact. And as a whole, our collection of 5 artifacts do a really good job of telling a combined story, at least of the Navy during the 80 or so years that Battleship New Jersey has been a part of it. And it doesn't necessarily go back the full 250 years, but having something weapons related in the ship's small arms, having something related to one of the famous ships that Battleship New Jersey operated alongside of, USS Enterprise, perhaps the most famous Navy warship of all times, having things related to our admirals and command and control and navigation in the phone and the binoculars, and then of course something relating to a much more modern technology goes a long way towards telling a comprehensive story of the Navy. And if Libby had let me add the other 245 objects that I have on my list, we would have added in some uniforms and some other stuff that gives you a better idea of what life in the Navy and on board the ship was like. One of those objects, probably number 6 on my list, would have been one of the Bonomatic coffee machines that we found on board. What tells you about Navy life more than a coffee maker? No, but honestly, my honorable mention for this video is Battleship New Jersey herself. The ship is an artifact. The museum treats the ship as artifact number 1 in our collection. It is accessioned like the 1911 or the nuclear launch keys or any of the other objects that we have. And what better way do you have to tell the story of the United States Navy than with the most decorated surviving ship of the Navy, a ship that has served in war and peace throughout the back third of the Navy's career, either serving the public as an education site, teaching about the Navy, or her actual active service for which she's so decorated. And it'll be interesting to see when this Navy book comes out if they include, obviously Battleship New Jersey is owned and operated by the museum, so it's not a Naval History and Heritage Command artifact, but the submarine Nautilus and the frigate Constitution are still operated by Naval History and Heritage Command and the United States Navy. They have active sailors assigned to them. And there are a number of other boats, submarines, vehicles, aircraft that are part of the Navy's collection. It'll be interesting to see if they include macro artifacts like those, the railway gun, or Japanese midget submarine that they have, things like that. Or if it will be more things that you and I probably think of more readily as artifacts like keys or binoculars or something like that. What are a couple of objects that you think would need to be included in a list of 250 historically significant parts of the ship or parts of naval history? Stephen Decatur's sword, Enterprise's bell. Let us know in the comments section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, as well as from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. While we don't receive monetary support from Naval History and Heritage Command, somewhere between 80 and 90 of the artifacts on display on the battleship are owned by Naval History and Heritage Command, who allows us to display them to the public. So we appreciate their support too. Remember to check the link in the description below for ways you can support them and their active work in preserving the ship's history. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.